Hello everyone, and welcome to QRTA Talk. We're so excited to have you here with us today, and we'll begin in just a few minutes as we wait for more participants to join. In the meantime, we'd love to know where you're joining us from. So please take a moment to share your country and organization or school in the chat box. It's always inspiring to see how far-reaching and diverse our audience is. Our participants from Jordan, from the United Arab Emirates, from Kuwait, hello everyone. We're glad to have you with us today. From Egypt, from Lebanon, hello everyone. From Qatar. From Saudi Arabia. Hello everyone. Thank you all for being here. And we really look forward to an insightful session together. From Palestine, from Lebanon, from the UAE. Good evening. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon from wherever you are. More and more participants are joining. Thank you all for joining QRTA Talk. It's wonderful to see the chat lighting up with your names, countries, and organizations. ضيوفنا الأعزاء، أهلا وسهلا بكم في جلسة مميزة من جلسات QRTA Talk. يمكنكم الاستماع إلى الجلسة باللغة العربية حيث تتوفر خدمة الترجمة الفورية من خلال الضغط على أيقونة الكرة الأرضية ثم اختيار اللغة العربية. Okay, good evening, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning, and welcome to this special session of QRTA Talk. This is Rilla Saeed, the Director of Education and Deputy CEO at the Queen Rania Teacher Academy. I would like to welcome you all to this session. Before we begin, I'd like to inform you that participants attending this session will receive a certificate of attendance. A feedback survey will appear when ending the Zoom webinar, so please take a moment to fill it out. Your opinions are important to us as we constantly strive to enhance and improve our sessions to better meet your needs. The session will also be available later on QRTA's YouTube channel. And of course, we would also love to hear from our audience. So please feel free to share your questions or comments in the Q&A, and we will try our best to address as many of them as possible during our session. Ladies and gentlemen, good teaching does not happen by chance. It is the result of continuous learning, reflection, and growth. Around the world, education systems increasingly recognize that continuous professional development is one of the most powerful drivers of improving teaching and learning. When teachers continue to learn, classrooms evolve, and students benefit. The latest OECD TALIS 2024 report, which surveyed more than 280,000 teachers across 55 education systems, highlights that continuous professional learning is one of the most important factors in developing teacher expertise and improving classroom practice. So, this is exactly what today's conversation is about as we explore planning for powerful teaching in 2026. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by Amanda Rosewarne, Chair and co-founder at the CPD Standards Office, who will share insights and experiences on how professional development can truly transform teaching and learning. Amanda has a background in occupational psychology and extensive experience in the continuous professional development field. Over the past 20 years, she has advised numerous individuals and organizations on the practice, provision, and policy of CPD, working with governments, professional bodies, regulators, and trade associations. As co-founder of the CPD Standards Office, part of the Professional Development Consortium and the author of the book, The Power of CPD, she is passionate about adult education and lifelong learning. We're very delighted to have you with us, Amanda, today. Hello and welcome to QRTA Talk.
Thank you, Rola. Thank you. Wow, what an introduction. Thank you so much. Well, I'm delighted to be delivering this session today on planning for powerful teaching in 2026. And it's a great privilege to be with you all this evening and be surrounded with a group of teachers and educators. You've given me an amazing introduction, Rola. So I will just briefly sort of top that one up by saying, so I founded the CPD Standards Office right back in 2012. But before that, my background was in occupational and business psychology. And I've always been absolutely fascinated as a psychologist, not in a kind of one-to-one psychology or psychology within a group, or a school or a company, but actually looking at adult learning from a community perspective, looking at adult learning from a profession's perspective, and trying to think about what is the best way that we can work with a community or a profession, such as teaching, one of the most important professions in the world, to kind of lift it up, to enable teachers to be the best at what they do, to have the right skills and the right competencies, and also to be able to give their teaching practice 100%, and then the student is the beneficiary of all of that. So that's something that I've always been fascinated with for most of my adult working life. And a bit sort of as an academic career initially, I won't digress too much, but we undertook an awful lot of research to understand a little bit more about continuing professional development. And we understood that sometimes the training courses that people do, the professional development activities that they choose, aren't necessarily the right ones for them for lots of different reasons. And it was kind of with that passion that we set up the CPD Standards Office, who are an independent CPD accreditation. And through that work, as a global organisation, we have had the pleasure of working with QRTA over the last few years. And we've had an enormous pleasure of working with many, many countries in the MENA region over the past 10 years. And I'm really honoured, as I said, to be with you all, and especially honoured that you're able to listen to me either in Arabic or in English. I don't speak Arabic. My most I can say is marhaban, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here. Okay, so what are we going to talk about today? What I want to do today is to kind of give you a kind of bigger picture frame of what continuing professional development should look like within the teaching and education space from your point of view. Okay, so I can give you all the CPD theory and policy in the world, but you're only going to get really excited about doing your professional development and thinking about how to be a powerful teacher, if it's something that comes from your own motivations and something that you are engaged within. So we're going to briefly cover what teaching does look like now in a rapidly changing world, and planning for how we do that deeper piece of learning, and then looking at the role of professional development and achieving professional growth. And Rola, I know that you'll be jumping in a few times with some questions. By all means, put some comments, make some observations in the chat. I've got it open, so I'll try and juggle the two. But the focus really is on a practical lesson. So planning some ideas and basically really starting to think about, or getting you to think about, how continuing professional development can strengthen the teaching practice and your student outcomes.
Indeed, a
Okay.
very inspiring topic, to be honest, Amanda, to all of us, especially at QRTA. So yes, we're very looking forward to that session. Please.
Thank you. Yeah, and I think, it is really interesting to think about, because, as old as humanity is itself, there has always been a teacher and a student. It's been there before it even became a proper profession. And if we think about the career and the lifestyle and everything that teachers and educators now have to encompass and have to embody, it really is, a profession that's absolutely critical to our society as much as anything else. But I think the reality of teaching in 2026 is very, very different from kind of where it all started thousands of years back. I mean, it's changed rapidly in terms of technology and artificial intelligence, particularly recently, which has had a huge disruption across how we're thinking about using technologies within education, within classrooms, etc. And I think there's also a growing awareness now that students are actually just not a kind of cardboard cutout. They're diverse, they have different learning needs. We need to think about their learning expectations and their needs and kind of mold the teaching around it. So the role of the teacher is, I think, very much evolving from just delivering information to actually becoming an architect and designing specific learning experiences against a set curriculum. And in that point, I think that powerful teaching is then partly the output of some very, very careful planning and education. But at the same time, we can't plan for everything. We have to have the skills and the capability to be able to improvise whenever a student needs something different from us. So, in your view, just put some comments in the chat. What do you think makes teaching powerful? Any comments going to go into the chat?
We can
Let's see.
go into the chat to
Anybody?
see if you have any comments.
Yeah, that's fine. You can keep them rolling in as we discussed, because I think powerful teaching is something that's very intentional. It needs to think about, somebody's got it there, putting the student to a certain extent in the centre of the experience and setting the learning goals around them and the learning outcomes. So it's about using the evidence base that we have, about making use of the scientific knowledge that we have, and ensuring that we've got, as Bayan's pointed out, firstly, a really positive environment that's appropriate for the students' needs, but also is an appropriate environment for the topic that's being taught. And I think, the more and more we understand about the evidence and the science behind teaching, neuroscience, and understanding adult learning from a biological perspective, we then can design something from a reflective position that then starts to really think about how our teaching can be powerful. And I mean, yes, Saka, you're right. There are so many different ways to think about this. There's so many different strategies we can use. But I think when we start from the position of how can my teaching be powerful today, and what professional development can I undertake in order for that to be the very best it can be. And I think sometimes, with our lives, with our social and professional responsibilities, some of that can get a little bit drowned out.
Well,
So,
Amanda, we've received many comments, by the way,
yeah,
yeah, as a response to powerful teaching. So,
yeah,
perseverance, enthusiasm, effective teaching is by using effective strategies,
yeah,
finding a way to reach children's mind. Powerful teaching is what creates impact and positive attitudes, planning and reflecting, healthy engagement, clear goals, passion and enthusiasm, student engagement and connecting learning to real life. So, receiving many, many comments.
great.
That's
Great. I love all of the comments, and I think all of the different ways that we're looking at it. It's very much about how the mindset is, and what we can do about it, and then all of, as we said, the education strategies that sit around that. And before I sort of jumped forward, I thought that it might be useful to kind of go back through the QRTA archives, and I came across a great session from one of the webinars last year from Dr. Andreas Schleider, I think is the right surname, who gave this presentation about harnessing creativity in schools, and it's on the QRTA webinar page. And he talked about the importance of making sure that students are equipped and encouraged with a growth mindset. And so, for those of you that haven't come across that before, there's a professor called Professor Carol Dweck at Stanford University. And a while back, she formalized this idea that people can either have a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. So fixed mindset is I'm in my world, this is my routine, this is how I live my life, these are my responsibilities, and this is how I go about my day. So it's very, very, very fixed. Whereas having a growth mindset is about believing you can achieve more than what life has in front of you at the time. And believing that if you set yourself some goals, you will be able to achieve even more. And she observed that basically some schools, some environments are more inclusive and have more of a culture of a growth mindset than others. And it's a contested theory, but nevertheless, it does kind of, observe that we can have these two different mindsets. And Dr. Andreas pointed out when they'd measured growth mindset across schools in his Creativity for Schools webinar last year, that having a growth mindset correlates with higher performance in mathematics. And he also noticed that some of the countries in the MENA region are not necessarily in a place whereby the growth mindset is fully enabled. And I think that is a great sort of opportunity and motivator for thinking about how we can achieve that today. Rola, what do you think about that?
Well, that's a very insightful point. And to be honest, Amanda, I was privileged to moderate this session. It was a great
Mhm.
session with Dr. Andreas, and it is actually worth noting, as you mentioned, that the data from the PISA International Assessment found that students with a growth mindset scored higher academically
Yeah,
than those who believed intelligence was fixed.
yeah,
So it's a very important point, and we always also talk about school leaders. So, in your point of view, what role do you think school leaders play in fostering a culture where both teachers and students believe they can continuously grow and improve? It's important to believe that you can continuously learn, grow, and
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think the role of the school leader is pivotal. Like they are the linchpin between those two different mindsets. And the school leader needs to be able to model what a good, expanding, achievable, inclusive, ambitious, imaginative environment looks like for us to be able to kind of get into that zone of thinking, as much as they are to tell others to do it. So I think, the role of the school teacher, the school leader is pivotal. But it also needs to kind of, they need to be the ambassador of that behavior and of that practice.
Indeed, I'm actually looking at the comments as well in the
Yeah,
chats, and some of them are in Arabic, so I'm trying to translate directly. So
sure.
one of the participants was saying, which is true, every teacher is a leader in his
Yeah,
or her classroom or in
yeah,
his or her learning environment, which is very true as well.
yeah, absolutely. But when we are leaders, as we are as teachers, we need our followers to be able to follow us and follow our mindset in the right way. I think one of the sort of most basic set of questions that you can start with is, whilst you've got your curriculum, and I don't want you to think, Amanda, what what is she talking about here? What I want you to do is think about how we can put the student in the middle. All right, how we can we put each student in the middle? Because one of the most powerful things we can do is actually start with the learning outcomes once we've got this clear curriculum or clear subject that we're teaching. So what are the students going to need to know? Like, what are they really going to need to know from all of the information we've got? How can I get them to understand using the resources that we have within the school, within the classroom, within the technology that might be available? And at the end of it, what do we want the students to do? And the answer there isn't that we just want students to be able to pass their exam or to write their coursework. What do we want them to be able to think about, and how do we want them to know how to use that information? And then once we've started to think about that, and if you can't answer those questions easily, the best thing to do is go and speak to some of the students that will be sitting in that class and ask them what would be their reflections, what would be their preferred way for you to talk to them about it, and how could you design it around them? Because you've got to now think of teaching as being a complete two-way process. And I think Amani, yeah, you've noted it, a 3D curriculum. Absolutely, now it's a two-directional, it's a bi-directional relationship. And we need to move beyond, which I think we are getting to now, but we need to move beyond just asking students to memorize information and then pass a test, because that's absolutely not useful schooling for life. So we've got to be able to put them in the middle and start with the learning outcomes to begin with. And Sorsen, as you say, start with the end in mind. So I know that you have a similar learning cycle, but the simple kind of design model that we use and that we advocate at the CPD Standards Office is to look at, before we get started, we clarify the intention. So we clarify the learning goals. And then we think about what prior knowledge may the student have already. Are they going to be completely new to this? Or is this a top up or an ongoing area that they're being presented with? How can they then connect to different ideas and different concepts? And what can we use in terms of activities or resources that will bring that alive? And then how can we make sure that they collaborate? And I'll talk about that a little bit in a second. How can we make sure that we can get everybody to collaborate together? Because we're social beings, human beings, and that we learn best when our collaboration is with other humans. And then finally, thinking about reflection, thinking about feedback from the students, and thinking through how impactful was that lesson? How impactful, how powerful was that teaching? And what can I do to make amends or to improve it for next time? Or do I, have I hit the nail on the head there?
Yeah, true. That is a very powerful learning cycle for the students and for learners, as you've mentioned. And Interestingly, in our professional development programs, we often use a similar structured approach.
Hmm.
We call it the I-LEAP learning cycle,
Okay.
I-L-E-A-P, where we start with the I, the introduction, L is the learn, E is the engage,
Right.
A, apply, and then practice and reflect. So it
Uh-huh.
gradually supports teachers in building their pedagogical knowledge and then applying it in their learning environments, in their classrooms. So the idea is very similar.
Hmm.
Learning begins by engaging participants, then introducing new knowledge, followed by interaction, application, and finally practice, so that learning becomes part of the teaching practice. And
Yeah.
definitely reflection.
Yeah.
Reflection is growth, is
Yeah.
learning, is enhancing as you move on.
Yeah. I think that's, it's always interesting to hear all of the different models that there are now regarding learning and learning cycles. And I think what's so interesting now compared to even just a decade ago is that now we always have this kind of reflection and feedback piece, which
Mhm.
is also what makes really good professional development. And that is now becoming really embedded in how we think about teaching and training as well in education. And I just find it really interesting that that is now a hook, and we all kind of understand that we've got to take that additional step. And it tends to be across most models. So,
And the participants actually are also sharing their comments, so which are very relevant as well. So Bayan, for example, is saying that it is so important to set up some various questions to
mm,
students based on RCEA, reflect, connect, evaluate, and apply.
yeah, nice.
Interesting.
Nice model there. Yeah, and I think they're all very similar, aren't they? They're all about taking a plan, taking an intention, building something, not assuming anything, building something from that, and then looking at that from almost like a quality circle point of view.
Mhm.
Okay, so then your next question is thinking about how am I actually going to engage the group of students that I've got here? How similar are they going to be in the room to one another, or how diverse is the room going to be? And how am I going to make sure that I engage every single one of them? And as our understanding of neuroscience is expanding, as the field of psychology and sociology grows, we now have an acute awareness that, you know, all of us have a different learning style. There are many learning style theories out there, and how one student learns best may not be how the next student learns. So your planning has always got to include, because at the end of the day, although you're the teacher and you're the educator, when you're in the classroom, it's about the students, it's about them. And you're managing the relationship with the education and with the information. But ultimately, it's about the student. And what we've got to do is find regular opportunities for them to either connect and collaborate with each other and to apply the learning together, or crucially, to be able to ask questions and have a safe psychological space in which to do so. And many studies have shown that the more active you can have, the more active your students can be, the more that they can participate, the more they have a voice and discussion, the more likely they are to memorize the information, they are able to use the information, and they're also more likely to enjoy it. And some of those strategies can work enormously well. But we've always got to think about how that student engagement piece is going to work, and if you're comfortable with it as well, whether you need to think about the styles that you need to adopt. And it may be, and it's the same when you're a trainer in a training room, you've got to kind of like flex your style and your delivery mode dependent on the particular group that you've got. So now I just want to jump over to continuing professional development, because we've thought about now, okay, so teaching is something that needs to be thought about in a very different way in 2026. There's a lot of different facets that we need to be mindful of in order to do the best that we can when we're in the classroom and within the school and within the educational environment. The things that we have to do as professionals within this space is our own building blocks of knowledge. And continuing professional development as a policy and as a requirement is only something that relatively, again, against the history of teaching, has become mandatory or as a guide. So what is continuing professional development? Our definition of continuing professional development is that it is just a simple, structured way to undertake lifelong learning that looks at particular competencies, whether that be knowledge, skills, attitudes, that are required in order for people to stay up to date and stay current, and then to excel within their particular areas. So in its most simplest form, some people get, they try to, it's difficult for them to break down continuing professional development. In its most simplest form, continuing professional development is a philosophy, and it's just a proactive way to complete and undertake adult lifelong learning and then have the reflection piece at the end. And why does it matter? Because it builds your confidence, it builds your skill set, it builds your self-efficacy, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then it has the benefit of passing on to the student. And lots of people say that continuing professional development doesn't always just benefit you as the professional, it benefits the recipient. So as teachers, the beneficiaries are our students. When we're a doctor, our CPD benefits our patients. When we're, an architect, the CPD benefits the client. So it has an interesting ripple effect in that when it's undertaken in a really proactive way, in a reflective way, it has this ripple effect of beneficiaries, and I think it's really interesting. So historically, CPD has been, here's a set of hours that you need to complete, or here's some recommendations for CPD that you need to complete, and now go and find a way to learn about it and maybe find a couple of different courses. And that's a very now old-fashioned view of CPD. What we actually have today with CPD, which is entirely what you are doing within your classrooms, is a multi-dimensional approach to thinking about our professional development. So we know it needs to be systemic because that's the very nature of how it's going to work. We know, though, it needs to be collaborative. We need to learn from our peers. We need to learn from mentors. We need to learn from other great educators. We need to learn for ourselves or for our students. It needs to be innovative. So it needs to be new ideas, new energy, interesting, and connecting new dots that we haven't done before. It then needs to be reflective, this word that we keep coming back to, and really then thinking about it from being an absolute multi-dimensional perspective. And of course, the last one is digital. Every piece of CPD now, even if it's in-person teaching, has a digital aspect to it or a hybrid aspect to it. And so when we're thinking about our CPD, we know that we need to be multidimensional in our approach. It's not just, here's the recommendations, here's some courses, go and do some learning. We need to rewire our brains to think about it from a slightly different perspective. Because ultimately, sorry, the slide's jumping around a bit. As I've said, learning is a social experience. So we as human beings are naturally social creatures. We grow and live in families. We extend our lives, working together in groups. And there are so many scientific studies that show that learning really does excel when it's a social environment, and particularly as adult learners. And sometimes it's very easy to think that your CPD needs to cover these areas, you need to go and do these courses, and then you need to go and do this reflective piece on your own. And actually, it needs to be a social experience. So constantly need to think about with your CPD, how can I link this to my community, to my school, to my colleagues, to my peers? How can I make it into a multidimensional experience?
That's very interesting, Amanda, to be honest. And the definition is also very interesting. And the idea of making sure that the CPD meets the needs of learners. How
Yeah,
can you ensure that it's impactful, it's sustainable? So the idea of professional learning communities is something that we at the Queen Rani Teacher Academy focus a lot on, communities of practice,
yeah,
disseminating the knowledge, which is extremely important.
yeah.
And this also definitely will bring us, and I think you're going to tap onto this, I'm sure, to the big question. I mean, with the rapid changes we are seeing in pedagogy and technology,
Mm-hmm.
continuous learning for educators becomes even more critical. So, what
Yes.
kinds of professional learning do you think will be most important for educators as we prepare for teaching in 2026?
I think we are going to see changes from the advent of artificial intelligence that will dramatically change how we teach. And I think we're in a very interesting point in time because we can predict that, but we can't actually articulate exactly what that's going to be or exactly how that's going to work. But we know that how education is going to be delivered over the next decade is going to change radically. I think any professional learning strategy has to encompass what most CPD policies recommend, but it should always be a blend of formal education, self-directed learning, and then work-based professional development. So taking those kind of like three different categories of formal, self-directed, and work-based, and then weaving in all of the different types of activities there.
Mhm. Thank you.
And I think one of the things to keep in mind is that your CPD it needs to be a patchwork. So it needs to be lots of different pieces of learning with different individuals and from different sources, etc., that kind of make up an overall blanket, if you like. So
Mhm.
it's not just about doing a course or a qualification or doing one thing that will be your CPD. It's actually about doing lots and lots of kind of building blocks or patches, as I said, in a blanket that kind of then gives and kind of grows your skill set from lots and lots of different diverse perspectives.
Indeed.
And ultimately, we know from our own research that when you undertake a certain amount of CPD yourself, when you're more proactive and you take the step forward to do it, you will feel 100% more in control of your career. You will feel all sorts of other benefits, and you will begin to kind of stand out from the crowd. And one of the things that CPD does, proactive CPD does, is it increases our own self-efficacy. Okay, so self-efficacy is a theory from Albert Bandura. You can see the psychological scientist in me. And it refers to, similar to a growth mindset, but it refers to the belief that we can change our behavior necessary to meet a specific performance level. Okay. So basically, it's how we feel about being ambitious and how we feel about achieving or changing the behaviors that we need. And we've seen in our CPD research that when somebody undertakes a lot of CPD in lots of different types over a year, if we measure their work engagement and we measure their self-efficacy, we see an increase. Now, it is a correlation, not necessarily causation, but we do see these kind of very strong psychological benefits of undertaking CPD. We also see then the more practical and more interesting benefits of continuing professional development, whereby you are much more likely, I think it's 90% more likely to be promoted, to take on a role with more responsibility, or to indeed achieve a pay rise or a higher paying role. So the science and the benefits, the case for CPD is there. It's good. And it brings us then to the point of, well, what makes good CPD? What makes a high quality CPD? Where should I find it? Somebody's put here, Bayan, in my opinion, we should be very careful using AI in learning because we don't not need robot students rather than humans. For that, we focus on life soft skills. I just thought I'd mention that comment because I think we're all in the same mindset. And recently, the World Economic Forum, and I think it's also on the LinkedIn skills reports, they have noted that whereas once the most important skills for work were basically a group of technical skills, because that was the way the internet was kind of flowing, today, I think it's the LinkedIn report from last year, says that the most important skill we need is adaptability. And then behind that, all of the soft skills that we have, all of the human skills that we have, are the best skills that we need at the moment. So I think that's a really, important point to make. And thank you for noting that in the chat, because AI will change what we do, but we've got to make sure that we all stay human within the classroom together. And as you say, not creating robot students, or indeed the students feeling that they've got robot teachers, which would be the other side of it. So,
Many comments in Arabic appear
okay,
saying that we should not depend fully on AI.
no,
And yeah, many of them are talking about
yeah,
AI, the impact that it would have on
yeah,
students.
yeah. I
Uh,
think AI, at the moment, AI tools are good if we use them very practically. So they're
Absolutely.
good for giving it, giving the large language models some information and saying what might be the learning objectives from all of this information. Or can you paraphrase, an overview of how I might deliver this? So it's good for using it practically. It's useful for giving it ideas. But ultimately, my belief at the moment is that if AI is the journalist, you are the editor. So we do not take what AI gives us and just use it. It's only giving us the first layer at the moment.
That's a very nice description. And because the title of the slide is about high quality CPD, and I
Yeah,
want to link it to your work directly, which is accreditation.
yeah.
So with the increasing number of professional development opportunities available today, how important is accreditation in ensuring the quality, in ensuring credibility and impact of these programs for educators?
It's a good question. I mean, the first thing I always say is that accreditation is not mandatory in most areas. CPD accreditation is not necessarily mandatory. So not every provider, not every CPD provider in the world will necessarily have CPD accreditation. And we're very, very transparent about that. However, that said, when an organization or a learning experience has been through an accreditation process, it has worked with independent third party criteria, it's been through a process, it is much more likely to be of a certain quality and to have met certain sets of standards. So, in my view, when you see, certainly when you see our badge, but if you see a CPD accreditation badge, it's a signpost that this particular learning experience has been reviewed. And I think in today's world of the factors we've just discussed, you can generate a course on ChatGPT if you really wanted to and have it up for sale within an hour online. Um, Making sure that you're using the accreditation marks as like a signposting system, I think is really important. because the source now, the training source of a learning experience, the author, the instructor, these are all people that need to be experts within their fields.
Indeed. I mean, building on what you said, studies also suggest that accredited institutions and programs often achieve stronger academic performance and
Yeah,
quality
yeah,
outcomes. Why? Because they operate under, rigorous standards and
yeah,
accountability frameworks.
yeah.
So that's what makes them, distinguished. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a learning organization is a growing organization, right? So if you see a training provider that has stepped forward and put themselves through a range of certifications, you can be assured that that organization is really taking what they deliver seriously. And I think, in a world, as I said, where courses can be, made within seconds, it's really important to have that third party um, uh, verification, if that makes sense.
Yeah, true.
Okay, so the next thing I'm asked a lot is what are my key CPD topics for 2026? What should I be thinking about? Amanda, I do my CPD all the time and I'm out of ideas. What can I do? What should I think about doing? What are the topics I'm doing? So I've put a few ideas down here, and it's covering a lot of what we've discussed already. Without a doubt, we need to be AI and digitally literate. You might not be using all the tools, you might not be experimenting with all of them, but we need to have a really strong awareness of the tools that are available. And the reason that that's important as educators is because our students are also going to have a foot in that world as well. So we have to be aware, we have to know what the technologies are that are transforming the teaching environment. Student well-being, very, very popular subject at the moment. It can be thought about from lots of different perspectives, but thinking about the student both as a learner, as a human, as somebody that has a life outside of the school and a life within the school, how they are and how we cope and we support and we collaborate with them is really, really important. And then we've got some of the points that we talked about earlier in the session. So, how can we think about inclusive thinking? How can we refine our own critical thinking? And how can we improve our engagement strategies? And these are all kind of like big, sort of sometimes fluffy words. So, my advice to you is what CPD to do when you don't know what CPD to do is to kind of break it down into these sort of colourful different boxes. So every year in red, we need to think about our human skills, our collaboration. And they're all of the skills that we've talked about from, the World Economic Forum and from LinkedIn in terms of being human. Yeah. So our creative thinking, our adaptability, our problem solving, innovation. What can we do each year to explore that part of us? How can we build our skill set there? We've mentioned transformative technologies. I think everybody's aware that we need to be digitally literate these days. But other areas to consider are sustainability management. So there is a huge awareness now about how we can work sustainably, thinking about the impact of climate change, thinking about how we as teachers, as schools, as employers need to behave and walk through the world now from that perspective. That's a really current topic that's quite interesting for you to explore. There's always topics around leadership and management that are emerging. You may have been on many, many leadership courses and be thinking, Amanda, please don't recommend another leadership course for me. But I would always advise to keep yourself up to date with the science of leadership and look at what studies the big universities are publishing and what is being discussed and how can we do that. Huda has said climate change, how is it related? Good question. So climate change, is is debated in many parts of the globe. But I think we've all got to carry an awareness now that we need to work in a sustainable way. And so, whether that's encouraging students to use less paper, whether it's thinking about the carbon output that the building is using, how we communicate, I think there's lots and lots of little steps. Rola, do you offer or work within the sort of sustainability or climate change arena at all?
Well, these are, to be honest, these are very important areas for professional development. And what is particularly striking is how CPD today goes far beyond subject knowledge
Mm-hmm.
to include
Yeah.
skills such as leadership, collaboration, well-being, ethical decision making. And responding to your question, at QRTA, we see the same priorities that are emerging strongly in our work,
Mm-hmm.
especially in areas such as building high-performance teams, strengthening
Mm-hmm.
leadership practices, supporting psychosocial well-being, social emotional learning, and of course, indeed, climate change. We've actually developed a full program on environment that taps into topics such as blue economy, green economy, waste management, climate
Uh-huh.
change is extremely important. Looking also into topics such as social media and education, personalized learning, of course, the science of learning, which is also very
Mm-hmm.
important.
Yeah.
So all of those topics are really more important than ever in today's
Yeah.
educational environments.
Yeah. Well, I think that is a really good point. CPD now does extend way beyond just thinking about an immediate skill update for us. The blend of things that we can do, the different areas that we can explore or think about, is it's ongoing. And there are so many, great providers out there, whether that be training providers, whether that be, employer portfolios, universities offering, often many universities now offer a CPD portfolio as well as their degree programs. There's just such a rich array of resources out there that we can go and find. And I think probably the challenge is for ourselves is making sure that we stay motivated, we stay creative in the CPD that we are looking to do, and that we stay, and we push ourselves to being up to date.
Absolutely.
So
Supportive as
just
well.
sort of on these final few points, then I think we also need to be realistic when it comes to CPD. You live very busy lives as educators, as teachers. You bring your whole self to work. So when we think about our CPD plan and we think about how we're going to put it together, we need to kind of really be realistic with ourselves to know actually there's going to be a great deal of challenges here. I need to find time to do the CPD. I need to find a way potentially to fund it if it needs to be paid for. I need to spend some time identifying my topics and my skills. So, we need to kind of be realistic and not necessarily go into it completely blindly. And so I kind of leave you with the thought of it's always worth, because when you want to take your, career under control, you want to put yourself in the driving seat, that you create your personal CPD plan. All right. So it's against what do my students need to know? Okay. What do my students need to achieve? What do I need to do from a work perspective? But also, what do I want to do? How can I put myself in the center? And what is going to create intentional and powerful teaching for 2026? And so I hope that's been a thoughtful session for you. I hope it's made you think about professional development through a slightly different lens. Really want you to take away the idea that, CPD is a very, very big picture now, and it's full of collaboration, it's full of reflective practice, And Rola, as you've said, it's really about now communities of practice and us coming together as peers.
That was very, very insightful, Amanda. We have wonderful
Pleasure.
comments of how they found it really useful. We'll try to answer a couple of questions in the
Yeah,
time
sure.
we have left. So one of the questions is from Dr. Firas El-Amari, who was asking, do you think that CPD programs should be about content-specific pedagogy or general pedagogy? So what do you think?
A tricky one. I mean, it depends on your field. It's not going to be a very helpful answer for you because I'm going to say it depends. It depends on your field as a teacher, right? So some subjects are going to need to be very, very content specific. Take anything technical or anything that we would think within a technical skill set, mathematics, physics, some of the science subjects. Uh, you're going to need to go really, really into the subject as well as going really, really wide as well. Um, I think probably my piece of advice is just to make sure that you don't choose one over the other. You make sure that you do that blend, that blanket of CPD as we talked about earlier.
Absolutely, I fully agree. And it's a combination of both, as you mentioned. We have a question from Asma Athman asking, how can we foster a culture of trust where teachers feel safe to collaborate openly, to share failures, and learn from one another?
That's a good question. I mean, working with QRTA, you are an amazing organization with clearly, wonderful communities within and surrounding it. So I think your CPD is always about trust. I think your CPD has to take place in a place where you feel psychologically safe and you feel that you can trust your peers and you're learning in a safe space as such a popular term. But my recommendation would be to come for your particular area, for you to come to the QRTA communities of practice and create social groups from there to kind of build the trust. Um, but if you're working within a good space, if you can find CPD activities that have that social element to them, then the beauty of CPD is that we are all adults when we arrive, at a learning experience or a training course. And so there should be a certain amount of trust we can build almost immediately. But otherwise, I would reach out to the wider communities that already exist.
Indeed, indeed. Thank you so much, Amanda. Thank you very much for this insightful and engaging discussion. Uh,
Pleasure.
Your reflections on continuum professional development and its role in shaping powerful teaching in 2026 have given us all much to reflect on as we look ahead to the future of education. I would also like to thank our audience on behalf of the Queen Rani Teacher Academy for giving us their time and for being part of
Thank
this
you.
conversation. Your commitment to continuous learning and improving education is truly inspiring. And I would like to leave our audience with a quote.
Mhm.
Develop a passion for learning. If you do, you will never cease to grow. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Amanda. Stay safe.
Thank you. Good
Thank
evening.
thank you.